where visionaries, entrepreneurs, and artists dream, transform, and create. You are listening to the Miracle Moment podcast, where your breakthrough is a moment away. I'm your host, Irelan. How to navigate relational dynamics while sharing your authentic story. This is such a good question. I've gotten this question so often from my clients, from people that are wanting to start writing their book, from people that just want to start to open up and use their voice and share their own authentic story. Whether it's online or in person, this can be such a difficult thing to navigate because when we're sharing our personal story, it's not just about us. We're usually sharing about the different characters that are a part of our story. And those characters tend to be people that we love or that are deeply ingrained in our lives, such as friends, lovers, ex-lovers, parents, family, teachers, mentors, people that are near and dear to our hearts, maybe some more than other. And we don't want to, stain some relationships. And so this question has come up many times where it's like, how do I navigate that? How do I speak my truth and also understand, the repercussions of what that's going to be? So I went pretty deep into this exploration while writing my book, Blame It on My Soul, which you can find now on Amazon and Audible. So check it out if you haven't yet. And while I was writing this book, I knew that I wanted to be raw. I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to be very authentic. And I really wrote it without truly bringing the people, the characters that I wrote about into my perspective. I really wrote this book first and foremost for me. So I went through what I went through. I shared what I needed to share. I wrote it out. And then it was once I was actually in the editing process where I was like, oh, this is going to impact the way that these relationships are. This is going to impact that person that I wrote about, whether they read it or not. And, sharing your story, it's especially if it's in a book, but even online with, the recording today, it feels permanent. It feels like something that you can't shift or change later. So I took time to explore what that would look like and what those dynamics would look like. And in that, I found some key points that I'm going to share with you today that really helped me find this sweet spot of totally sharing my truth and the real raw version of it, while also simultaneously having my boundaries very clear and feeling confident in what I was sharing. So now, for instance, I just brought my book to a women's gathering that I hold. It's the Women's Entrepreneur Collective that I co-host once a month down in San Diego. And we just had it this last week, or just about 2 days ago. And it was the first time I brought my book. And it's cool because I can really pass it out. I can have my book in my hand and give it to someone knowing that their life could change from reading the book, knowing that it will impact them, knowing that it will spark tears. It will also bring on laughter, and knowing that I can stand so true and strong in everything that I shared in that book. And so I'm going to share with you my process to getting there in this episode. Um, so first and foremost, it took me some time, and I think this is why when we're writing a book, something that's kind of this larger masterpiece, it is important to take time with it because you want to sit and you want to see what changes happen. So for me, it took me 3 years to write my book, and I'm so glad that I spent that time and let it marinate because it gave me the time to really authentically see all the characters that I wrote about, all the people in my life that, impacted me in a various ways. It gave me the time to really authentically see them in their highest. So that meant that I had to do my own healing work through this journey. I didn't want there to be blame and shame and these lower vibrational, you know, experiences and recordings of these other people because when I actually sat down with the fullness of my book, I was like, these are people that I love or I have loved and I want to share my truth, but I don't want to go into victim while writing this. So, that meant sometimes while in the writing process, while in the editing process, it would actually catapult me into a healing episode, a healing journey. So I would sit down and write my book, and then I would be writing, and I'd write maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs, and then I'd have to just put my computer down because I needed to go into deeper healing work for myself. And really taking the time to honor the process of me stepping out of my comfort zone and sharing some of this stuff, I really needed to honor my own personal healing journey along the way, which really allowed me to heal, and honor all the characters that are in my book. Um, in the way that I knew best at the time. And again, one thing I will say, I know it does feel like it is permanent, and I shared that earlier, but we can change our perspectives. We can say, I've learned and I feel different. So I did always have that in the back of my mind as well. But I really tried to put it to the test of like, will I be able to stand for this? So that brings me into my second point, which is speak your truth and own it fully. Take responsibility for how this will land if the people that you're writing about read it. And if it's not worth their reaction, is it really worth it for you to share? And this was a hard question that I had to ask myself. And in some cases, it was like, yes. In other cases, I decided no, like it's not worth it. And it's not making a point that is that important to me. So I kind of navigated in that way. And then when it came down to the book itself, I decided that anyone that I was using, that I had written about, that I was using their name, I decided to bring it to them. So I copy and pasted all the parts that, involved them, and I sent it to them. And actually, before I sent it, I sent them a message and asked and said, I've written about you in my upcoming book. I'm curious if it's okay if I can use your name or if you'd prefer me to change it to a different name. And if you would like, I can send you all the parts that I have written about you. So let me know. So this put me in such a vulnerable state because some people I had written about and I didn't want to share it with them, but I knew that this was the right thing to do. And it was fascinating because there were actually some people that are in the book that were way more supportive than I even thought. And that was really cool to experience. And again, it helped me connect to their highest self and remind myself that we're all on our healing journey. We're all on our healing path. We've all done stupid stuff that has affected other people. And, sometimes that happens. So that was a really cool piece that I got to take away. And, some said, please change my name. And I was happy to do so. And it made it feel like I had my bases covered and, I could really fully own and take responsibility for everything I said. Another piece that I want to bring up is really understanding your why. If your story was to blow up and become viral, and if you had press all of a sudden all around you outside your house, like in between your grocery store and picking up your kid from school or whatever it is, how would you be able to stand? Would you be able to stand in your truth and speak your voice? What if it was really bad press? What if they were kind of highlighting some of the more negative sides of what you had shared? Are you willing and able to still stand in your truth and speak your voice? This really, when I started asking myself this again, it really helped me open to being prepared for everything that could come. One of the pieces that it led to in my book specifically was I I found that there was this fear that I had around, me sharing about my suicide attempt, my near-death experience. And it led me to actually implementing more support in in the book with phone numbers and resources for anyone that was dealing with depression or suicidal thoughts. And I could just redirect their attention to these other resources. And I actually, even in my book, there's some parts that say, just put this book down if you're experiencing this and go call this number if you're in this country, if you're in this town. And I worked with a friend who um, works with others and does suicide prevention hotline services and talked with her, and we really dialed in how to message that, where to put it in the book, where it's most important. And it was like, okay, great, this feels good. I checked it off the list, and I feel like I can really stand in the truth of my book, knowing that I've done everything that I can do to, support anyone that's reading the book and picking it up and going through those experiences. So really be prepared for anything and everything to happen and share your story from that place of intentional awareness. One thing that I want to share is you don't have to share everything, or you don't have to share anything that you don't want to. It really is your story. So it doesn't mean that you're not being authentic if you have some pieces that you want to withhold. This is totally up to you. When I share this with some people that are getting ready to write their book or that want to share their story, they're like, oh, okay, awesome. And, that might take the pressure off. And you might find later on that you do want to share more of it and a few more pieces. Like just start with sharing what you want to share and go from there. It will expand your capacity to be vulnerable, your capacity to share your truth, your voice will expand over time. So there's no reason to just push it in the beginning. And with that being said, don't share what you don't want to share. Also, share what you do want to share, even if it feels uncomfortable. And no, trust yourself. You'll know the difference between pushing your edges around visibility, vulnerability, and authenticity versus going too far, pushing yourself too far. I've done this. For me, it tends to trigger me into like a stress response where sometimes I'll get like rashes on my hands and fingers, and I know it's like, oh, I've pushed myself too far. Everyone's boundaries are different and only you will know where those lay. So decide for yourself where they're going to be, share what you want, know where the boundary feels good to kind of dance on the edge. And if you have a vulnerability hangover, if you need to put a sweatshirt on, put your hoodie on and like completely close the hole around your entire face and not talk to anyone the next day, like that's a vulnerability hangover. We can handle that as humans. I think that's really good to actually be in that practice. And but know where your boundaries are. If it's affecting your health, if it's affecting your relationships or your mental space too much, then ease off a little. And the last thing I'll say is just share, just go for it, see what happens. The more you share, and like I said, you can start small, the more you'll be able to know your own voice and your truth. And so you might fumble at first. That's okay. Be okay with not getting it perfect. And it will get more smooth and graceful over time. I have a pretty intense story, that I share both when I'm speaking, when I'm having conversations, when I'm working with clients, in my book, on my podcast. Like, it's all over the place. And it's really taken me years to develop how I share my story in a way that I feel comfortable and safe. It always does feel raw and emotional, and I love to bring that because I think that helps us connect to the listeners. But there really is this sense of understanding that I also have with my story and why I want to share it and how I want to share it and sensitivities and just that intentional awareness that I mentioned earlier. So just start sharing. Don't put all the pressure on to let the full, cat out of the bag, but have fun with it. And, as you navigate these relationship dynamics while you're sharing your true story, I hope these tips can help really anchor you into your own truth so you can take that stand and you can be that voice. So important. We need to hear more of that true authentic voice from leaders like yourself today. Thanks for checking out this video. Subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't yet so you can stay up to date for new episodes coming out soon. And remember to witness and acknowledge the miracles and magic in every moment. This is Irelan, and I'll see you soon.